Over the past decade, I've played a ton of D&D, but my current favorite tabletop role-playing game is Symbaroum. Symbaroum boasts a powerful dark fantasy setting and intense combat rules that make for gritty adventures. But I am not the sole writer of this tale. I allow my players to dictate the course which I facilitate, no matter where that journey may lead. But I could never have expected this twist.
Welcome to Symbaroum, the fantasy dating show. Our hopeful groom for tonight is Dago Odagoy, an aspiring Templar and aspiring for love. Our groom is going to be assisted by his best man, Apathos, who informs us he is definitely not a witch. Charming in more ways than one. Let's meet the ladies. First up is Maid Mahira, the impossibly gorgeous but tomboyish farm girl. She was previously betrothed, but her fiancé was slain by Red Witch death cultists, so she's back on the menu and looking scrumptious. But this contest is far from over, folks. We have the thief, Tacita, recently captured and bound in chains in Dago's basement. It turns out that this lowly thief is actually a runaway noble who could provide higher station and fortune to our bachelor. Or maybe he's looking for someone who can match him in battle just as much as the bedroom. Please welcome the barbarian shield maiden, Inga, the petite and sweet leatherworker, Quelena, the mature and domineering witch hunter, Tinrava, Velator, the treasure hunter, Ilva. Yes, we've got quite the show for you tonight, and an eager bachelor with a ticking clock to be wed or forever be a lowly knight protector without a proper house. Dago thinks he knows the stakes, but he doesn't know that there's a second contestant tonight. The young and lecherous Duke Gadramai of Castor is also seeking a bride. It will be up to Dago and Apathos to not only find a match for young Odagoy, but satiate the Duke's lust before he condemns their outskirt town. Now, let's head to our audience poll for a quick vibe check. It looks like the audience is actually seeing sparks fly between Dago and his advisor, Apathos. Well, they do spend lots of time together in the manor, whispering about upcoming schemes. But that's not the only rumor we know. Our final surprise guest is Dago's romantic pen pal, who has not been told of his plans to marry none other than Father Edogai. Okay, so let me explain. All of that is basically true to what's happening in our Symbaroum campaign right now. Dago wants a political marriage to improve his noble standing, even though he's actually attracted to Father Edogai. And the Duke is complicating things by having the hots for Mahira. But he only heard about Mahira's beauty through rumors of some beautiful farm girl, so he hasn't seen Mahira and announces to Dago he will visit in 3 days to meet this woman. Dago and Apathos hatched up a plan to pretend one of the other women in the town was actually Mahira, while the real Mahira hid from the Duke. And to do that, they decided to interview women of the town. I'm establishing a bit and adding a comedic framing, but we're still in a dark fantasy tale. I could have framed it completely differently if I wanted to.
Does that mean we're not doing the Game of Thrones bit?
You know nothing. The political marriage, the conniving Duke, and the helpless maiden, warrior women, and suspicious witch hunters, these are all pieces of a medieval fantasy, and we are still playing the game of Symbaroum with lots of dice rolls, as well as references to the established setting and factions. The biggest difference is that the only part of this I wrote was the Duke hearing a rumor about Mahira. Everything else has been a result of the player's choices, random chance, and improvisation. By not writing the adventure for the players to respond to, but rather taking in the player's direction and painting the scenes they want to go to, I am engaging in emergent storytelling. This is a term you've probably heard floated around RPG spaces, but there are some examples in popular media. Although, by looking at them, we also see how they don't quite hit the mark. By the way, spoilers ahead, but I don't think I'm ruining anything for you. The journey matters more than the destination. Anyway, George R.R. Martin has famously described his writing style as a gardener approach. Rather than determining an outline and writing in the space to get to the predetermined points for his characters, Martin creates characters and has interesting events happen to them, and determines what the likely outcome of those intersections would be. This helps lead to some of A Song of Ice and Fire's iconic twists and character-defining moments. Jon Snow is not killed because Martin is a devious goblin who wants to shock his readers. He is killed because his decision as Lord Commander of the Night's Watch is in conflict with the oaths of the Night's Watch, so his brothers choose their oath over this boy and end his command. This is fantastic, but this is all happening within the mind of one author. Gurm, in particular, has spoken against changing the story based on the whims and speculation of the audience in his The Butler Did It corollary. Your emergent TTRPG narrative has to account for multiple players interacting with each other and the story, an audience that provides feedback to the media that changes its final product. Many TV shows develop their serial narratives in conversation with the reactions of their audience. How I Met Your Mother is a show I watched in its entirety as it ran. The story is framed as a mega flashback, where a grown father Ted is telling his teenage kids how he met their mother. Sitcom hijinks and drama ensue. Ted dates and bangs an incredible number of women, including his friend Robin, and apparently tells his kids all about this. Throughout the middle seasons, the writers responded to what worked and what didn't work by having Ted and Robin break up, introducing strife and doubt to the idealized romance of Marshall and Lily, and building believable chemistry between Robin and Barney. Come the final episode, we go back out of the flashback framing to reveal Ted telling the conclusion to his kids, who tell him that now that their mother is dead, by the way, he should just go be with Robin. So he does. It's awful. The creators had a predetermined ending in mind and felt so beholden to the footage of the actors playing Ted's kids at the appropriate age that they ignored years of story and character development in conversation with the audience in favor of looping back to that ending. The emergent narrative was created and destroyed. Video games provide more direct input from their audience of players. BioWare games in particular bridge the gap between tabletop fantasy and digital storytelling. There's a lot to learn from the Dragon Age series, but my own first video game love story was the Mass Effect trilogy. You play as Commander Shepard, an established role kind of like Geralt of Rivia, but unlike Geralt, you as the player get to determine Shepard's gender, appearance, and backstory in a way that tells you this is your Shepard, this is your game. There are 6 different playable classes that change up the mechanics of combat in exciting ways, and the decisions and dialogue options often come with the choice between Paragon or Renegade, a binary morality that massively changes the themes and mood of the story you play through. Forced decision points create branching paths that play off one another. You forge friendships and rivalries, and of course alien sex, with a lovable cast of companions whose fates are in your hands. Characters who are lost in one game will not appear in the next. The fates of entire civilizations are in your hands, all leading up to a final confrontation to take back Earth from the cosmic horror robo-squids known as the Reapers. In the final hour of Mass Effect 3, your Shepard makes their final choice, a choice which was protested by thousands of angry nerds. All your choices, all your combat builds, all your relationships and alliances come down to a choice between red, blue, or green. There's more thematic significance between these 3 choices, but the result is the same. The emergent narrative you created for your Shepard is overruled by the conclusion chosen by the creators. Even before the controversial endpoint, the choices offered by a BioWare game are limited. If I'm talking to another Mass Effect fan and describe my game as Vanguard Femshep, Garrus Romance, Cure the Genophage, Save the Quarian Synthesis, I effectively paint a picture of exactly what my playthrough was like and how it was similar to their own. Your tabletop role-playing game has many more possibilities and will be harder to explain. The imaginations of multiple participants collide with the possibilities of the dice to form a writer's room that can develop endless possibilities in real time. This is a crucial piece to the Emergent puzzle. The Game Master is not the sole writer of the narrative, nor are we following a pre-written adventure module that adds an extra staff of writers, but adds more limitations within the book's page count. Adhering too closely to the pre-written module or the Game Master's personal fantasy novel creates the dreaded Railroad, a linear adventure where the players and their characters participate in the set series of events but have little to no agency in changing the course of those events. A railroad doesn't necessarily guarantee a bad game. Particularly in a one-shot or tutorial adventure, a well-designed railroad can be transformed into a roller coaster by a charismatic GM. But 90% of the bad D&D stories you hear and 90% of my own poorly run adventures are a result of a dungeon master exerting too much control over their players and their narrative. So, clearly the solution lies in abandoning the tracks and offering a wide open world for the players to choose their own path and story threads to follow. Right? Maybe not. The railroad has been talked about to death, but I think not enough enthusiasts fear the dangers of the sandbox enough. A sandbox lays out a setting with many possible quest markers, landmarks, and enemy spawn points. Players travel the setting, with or without a hex crawl, and either choose or stumble upon little or big problems that they can solve or move on from. This can be great for a lot of groups, but in my experience with my own games, seeing online stories and chatting up customers in the game store, it tends to go stale when the players realize there are no stakes and no consistency, just a series of random events. So we have two danger zones to avoid with a safe zone down the center. How do we roll the ball that is our narrative down this narrow lane and knock down all of our goals to achieve maximum effectiveness? Hey, look at that, I accidentally nailed a sports analogy. Go me! Let's get back to Symbaroum. In Session 0, the players made their characters. A crucial step in this process for Symbaroum is the personal goal. For Dago, it was re-establishing his house and becoming a Templar. He was already a noble Ambrian, but his home and his family were destroyed in the Great War with the undead, so he needs to create his own fate in the new world. As a twist, Dago Odagoy is not really Dago Odagoy. Our character is a squire that killed the real Dago and took his place. For Apithos, it was finding his place in the new world. Apithos is a changeling in the classical fairy tale sense. A human baby was stolen by elves, and Apithos is the elf baby that they left in the crib. Like so many changelings in Symbaroum, Apithos grew up like a normal human, but was rejected by his parents when he hit puberty and his pointed ears and elven features started to show. As a pariah in Ambrian society, Apithos was drawn towards barbarian witchcraft, learning how to lay on hands and bend will. These are solid characters made by experienced roleplayers. Now they need a group goal to unite them as a party. Sessions 1 through 3 I am titling The Odagoy Blade. Dago enters the town of Castor where Apithos lives. Apithos has saved his life on the road and the two are now friends, but Dago has a purpose here. He has heard that his family's artifact sword is being held in the temple to Prios in Castor, to be worshipped as a holy relic. Dago intends to retrieve the blade that is rightfully his and use his name and the blade to build his house in Castor. When they arrive at the temple, there are already others bickering over the blade, which is set to be taken by Black Cloaks at noon. The priest, Father Edigai, says the matter is out of his hands. But the Templar Ravina Gaeador says she has long waited for the blade to be used by her order as a weapon rather than a mantelpiece. And the barbarian Harkin has an idea to use the blade as a bargaining chip with the nearby hostile Karahar clan. Now Dago enters the picture saying the blade should be his. They are all interrupted when the Black Cloaks come early and draw weapons. They reveal themselves to be elves in disguise, here to take the blade into Davokar for some unknown purpose. Dago and Apithos afford themselves well in the skirmish that follows, but the blade is taken and our group goal is set. Retrieve the Odagoy blade and find a purpose for it. At this point, as Game Master, I am using the familiar structures found within the Symbaroum core rulebook to establish a hook that sends the player characters into Davokar to find their fortune. The relevant factions are at play, and because this is a 2-player campaign, I give them a choice in 2 or 3 allies they can bring along. Dago and Apithos track down the thieving elves, wind up negotiating with them for the blade, and then agree to use the blade for Harkon's intent to broker peace between the barbarians of Karahar and the Ambrians of Castor. I'm hedging very close to BioWare storytelling here. Choose your companions, choose an alliance, do your paragon or renegade to the elves, you get it. This outline is sound, but it's safe. I'm not doing anything particularly novel. Dago and Apithos use the blade to kill a lindworm before returning it to the elves as promised to be destroyed. Session 4. Dago and Apithos return to Castor and things are a bit dull. I didn't do any prep for this session because I wanted to see where my 2 players wanted to go, but neither of them really had any inkling of what to do now that their grand quest was over. So I improvised a combat encounter. The ranger that guided Dago and Apithos into Davokar, his name is Carleo, he's neat, barges into the tavern pleading for aid with trolls attacking a nearby village, and like good adventurers in a tavern, our characters leap to his aid. They rustle up a posse and ride out to the village, overrun by cultists, some trolls, and a red witch. Dago and Apithos have to choose to take back the manor or the barn, and they can approach by the road, the wood, or the rocks. To my credit, I improvised all of this encounter without the use of random tables. To the players' credit, they utilized all of their resources and reconnaissance to defeat their foes and take back the village. Along the way, Apithos bravely rescues 2 strung-up villagers from the burning barn. This was intended as a binary choice to save the humble woman or the noble man, but Apithos chose the third option of greater danger to instead save them both. As the dust settles and the players ask me more information about these 2, I hastily decide that the woman is devastatingly beautiful and knows how to run the town, and her name is Maid Mahira. The man is a retired officer who wants to retire from the countryside and bequeaths Dago his plate armor and greatsword and promises to put in a good word for him with the Duke. Sessions 5 through 7 are where the hints of our narrative emerges. Dago and Apithos are summoned to the Duke's court. By now, these 2 have brought honor back to the church, slain a lindworm, brokered a peace treaty, and defeated a death cult, complete with trolls. Dago gets all the credit as the Ambrian nobleman, but he introduces Apithos as his honorable advisor in these affairs. The Duke grants Dago one request. I don't have any idea where this is going. This is essentially one free wish for the players. Dago's player asks for the village they saved. He tells me out of game that he loves having a city to run. Okay, I think I can work with this. The village never had a name, it was only intended as a set piece for an improvised fight. But now the players have imbued it with meaning, so I give it a name, Thornhall. I whip out the hex grid, and our city builder is born. I had recently been playing Manor Lords through Steam, and used that as a basis to establish a few quick buildings and resources without getting bogged down in the math and details. Dago and Apithos went around Castor recruiting new villagers from their existing allies Carleo and Harkon, and they retrieved Mahira from the Duke's hospital so she can tell them all about how to run Thornhall. Just like the village, Mahira didn't come into being until the players showed interest. She was a damsel in distress, a blinking objective on a combat map until Apithos saved her and asked her name. With Mahira and 40 villagers established, I set the mechanics of our city builder minigame. Turns will occur in 1-month increments. Villagers will be divided between builders, farmers, guards, and seekers, like a worker placement board game. The players will make rolls based on how many villagers are in each role. Roll under, and the chosen project for that month is a success. While this may seem like a departure from Symbaroum, veteran players may note that all I've done here is take the roll under attributes of any character sheet and translated them onto a village. We are still playing a dark fantasy RPG, but we have developed an emergent narrative based on the story we want to tell and the game we want to play. While I leave a lot of blank space in my session log to track the various projects and successes, for each month I provide 2 preset events. This is a bit like Frostpunk, another city builder video game where your policies affect things just as much as your buildings. Events in your playthrough will be determined by your choices and some RNG, but there are set times for things like the next storm. For our game, I know that there are dangerous monsters in the quarry. There is a hidden tribe of goblins that can be fought or parleyed with, and I know that on day 1 of month 3, Duke Gadramai will visit Thornhall demanding to lay eyes on Maid Mahira as a prospect for marriage. This is where the dating show came in. Ironically, Dago's player came up with the idea for his own political marriage a session before, which meant I got to cackle to myself as he fumbled his way through chatting up Mahira because I already knew how much more soap opera-esque things were going to get later when the Duke is doing the exact same thing. When they heard about the Duke and realized that Mahira didn't want to wed anyone, it was the players who hatched the scheme to swap her out for a false Mahira to catch the Duke's eye. I rolled up some random women NPCs for them to interview using some pre-established name and personality tables I had made with input from the players. The dating simulator was an entirely unpredictable scenario, but because of the building blocks of Symbaroum's setting and factions, the characters' goals, the mechanics of the dice, the players' decision-making, and my own loose session prep that enabled improvisation, our emerging narrative was born. So, what's next? I don't know. We're only through 3 months in the adventure, and I don't know what twists the players will add to the mix or what projects they will have the villagers attempt. I do have 2 events outlined for month 4, 1 combat scene and 1 social scene, neither of which I'm going to spoil here in case the players are watching. I'll only say this. You don't drop a hidden identity onto your character and not expect it to come up at some point. So that's my Symbaroum story, for now. But you probably don't play an obscure Nordic dark fantasy RPG. You probably clicked on this video for D&D tips or general writing advice. Let's talk about some basic writing principles and how they relate to emergent storytelling. Every story needs a beginning, a middle, and an end. You'll note how I grouped together certain sessions of our campaign into distinct adventures. The beginning is typically set up with a hook written by me as the game master, the middle is determined by the players and the dice, and the end is a little hard to come by. You have to improvise in the moment and work together to find a fitting conclusion to close out the night and lead into next week. On the grand campaign arc, we are still in the middle. The end could arrive when we get tired of Symbaroum and play another RPG, when I kill Dago and Apithos in a 2-target TPK, or when Dago and Apithos both achieve their goals and decide their adventure concludes with their fully developed fantasy town living happily ever after. We could call that the denouement. Each adventure can follow the general structure of rising action, climax, and falling action. The rising action included the argument in the temple before the elves arrived, scoping out the village before engaging with the cultists, and the current rising tension of the town building and the Duke's designs. The moment where the Duke sees Kolena passing herself off as Mahira is a sort of climax in itself, but that's just for 1 session. The overall climax of the dating sim will be whether or not the Duke actually marries Kolena, and as Dago seems to have put his own political marriage at the wayside, his personal climax is being set up with Father Edagai. This is completely serious and not played for laughs. Both Dago's player and I like men. Dago is gay, and while I didn't intend my priest NPC to be a gay ginger twink, the more the 2 characters interacted, the more it made sense. The falling action of whatever climax occurs will be how these intermingling alliances and romances affect Castor and Thornhall, and what that might mean for the bigger picture of Ambrians and Barbarians contending with the mystery and corruption of Davokar that is at the core of Symbaroum's story. Finally, there's the arcs of our characters. Symbaroum provides a useful tool to this end by prompting character and group goals. but it could be argued that more emergent narratives can be formed in a game like D&D, where these things aren't explicit on your character sheet. Players are allowed to find what they want to engage with the most in the game world, whether that is a particular magic item, romancing an NPC, saving their hometown, or reaching level 20. Finding your beginning, middle, and end is usually obvious. The rising and falling action around your climactic scenes tend to come naturally as well. It's just a matter of bending that tide to fit your story and your real-world time frame. But determining a character's arc in real time is tricky. If you create your character with a development path in mind, you are not letting a narrative emerge. You are building a railroad and expecting the narrative to conform to your wishes. It is better to take on the role of the gardener, to let your character grow based on the events of the story until you can look back and see what blooms. The peak of this is when two or more characters' arcs are parallel, growing together or growing apart as they respond to the same events in the role-playing space. Combining these storytelling tools with the mechanics of your preferred RPG and an open mind can lead to some truly inspiring stories. But an emergent approach is not necessarily the best. I love our Symbaroum story so far. It's one of my favorites and probably one of the best things I've ever made with friends, but it's not without its problems. As we come to a close on this part of the journey, let's talk about some potential pitfalls of this approach. Every script could use a good edit. When you are playing a TTRPG, you do not have that luxury. You have to improvise in response to the rolls of the dice, the choices of the players, and your own plans. The character Tacita emerged from a successful guard check on the Town Builder minigame. Good roll, your guards caught a thief, moving on. But the players didn't want to move on. They wanted to interrogate this thief and see their motives. So I whipped out my random name table and rolled Tacita. That name, for me, instantly evoked a story because it sounded like an Ambrian noble name. I quickly concocted a young runaway, bored with her life as a noble and seeking the thrill of crime, a little bit of Elizabeth Swann from Pirates of the Caribbean. I connected her back to Castor and decided she had a fling with Carlio to bring up a familiar connection, a funny coinkydink. When pressed on by the players about their thieving motivations, I hastily added the detail that Tacita was stealing leather armor to try to impress the local thieves guild, the Jade Hoods. In retrospect, I think this was a bridge too far. Clearly, I'm good at coming up with story beats and character traits in a few seconds, but if I was better, I would know when to stop. Tacita already had enough going on with her as a side character, but with this Thieve Guild angle, I not only added one too many complications for her, I added a new faction to the game world that appeared to be a hook for the players. Now, Apithos and Dago are both trying to find the Jade Hoods, Apithos to eliminate the threat, and Dago to secure his own troop of spies. If this were a novel, I have no doubt a good editor would ask me to scrap this Thieves Guild side plot. But we're playing a role-playing game. The die has been cast, the guild is established, and the players want more, so I'll have to find an endpoint that satisfies the overall campaign. You may have noticed that throughout the recap, I spent a little more time on Dago than on Apithos. Or like, a lot more time. Dago has main character energy. His noble status and his backstory run counter to Apithos' pariah status in the game world, of course, but I think the bigger factor at play is that I'm a little more biased towards knight stories than outcast stories. I was raised as a Boy Scout. I liked Jedi and the Round Table. No matter what system I play in, I am drawn towards a noble paladin type character. We all have a type, and for better or worse, my type means I have a preference for telling Dago's story while Apithos plays second fiddle as the advisor. In an ideal game, there should be equal balance between the characters. There shouldn't be a Luke in your game driving towards his heroic destiny. Everyone should be playing Hanz, Leia's, and Chewbacca's, forming a team and determining their story as a group. If I were planning out this tale or reading from a published adventure, there might be equal focus on Apithos. But because I'm improvising so much, it's harder for me to work against my own preferences and balance my focus. Finally, we come to perhaps the biggest issue. We're only 7 sessions into our Symbaroum game, and it's already one of the most complex stories I've run between the dating sim, the town builder, and the more traditional combat and artifact hunt storylines. These are all dangling threads, and with each season, we add more threads than we tie up. Mass Effect and How I Met Your Mother may have had bad endings, but they were endings. The many disparate stories had to inevitably come together to a fixed point, and my adventure doesn't have that. I don't mind not knowing the ending yet. I don't want to build a railroad, but what bothers me is I have no idea where all these threads are leading or what sort of thematic vision they weave together. We're having a lot of fun, but at the moment, I get the distinct feeling that our tale is wide as an ocean and shallow as a puddle. I can't keep coasting on random NPC generators and town builder checks. At some point, all of this has to mean something. I'm confident I can pull that off with a little help from my friends, but I don't know how I'm going to do it. And just like the tale of Thornhall, we're not done here. This is the end of part 1 in a True Sight trilogy. I still haven't talked about serial versus episodic approaches, multiple storylines, the story point mechanic, and the hero's journey. In part 2, I intend to cover these topics and more as I try to explain my 4-year 5th edition D&D Ravenloft campaign called Balls of Borca. And in part 3, I don't know yet. I'm going to see what happens in my games, and I'm going to see what you guys leave in the comments. You are a part of this. Let me know what you're curious about with regards to emergent storytelling, or tell me a little story of your own. Until then, I hope you have a Nat 20 day. Bye-bye.
Is the video over? It's very cold here. Are you just gonna leave me? I don't want it. Is there a subscribe button over my head? My girlfriend is laughing at me. McQueen. She's shaking her head so hard.